Hi everyone, and welcome to my continued coverage of the Candidates Tournament 2013. After 9 rounds, the favourite Magnus Carlsen has moved half a point clear of Aronian. He is on 6 out of 9, and the two had been neck and neck, but to everyone's surprise, Aronian lost against Gelfand in the 9th round, so Carlsen has the smallest of leads with 5 rounds remaining. The game I thought we'd look at this time is the round 9 game between Peter Svidler and Alexander Grischuk, both top-level Russian grandmasters of the highest order. Svidler had white and opened with d4, after which came knight f6, which is going into one of the Indian defences, most probably, and indeed that was the case after c4, g6, knight c3 and bishop g7, the King's Indian, which used to be a lot more popular at the top levels than it is today, with only a few of the chess elite still willing to play it. In the time of Fischer and even Kasparov it was much more popular. Play continued with the book line e4, so in hypermodern fashion black is allowing white this impressive pawn center and will aim to undermine it later if play follows the normal ideas. Grischuk now played d6, which is prophylaxis against the e5 push, although black can omit this move, d6, and allow e5, is a provocative opening anyway, if he likes. So Svidler now played f3, which is the Simish variation which he used to beat Rajabov earlier in the tournament. This cements his pawn at e4 and allows for a later bishop e3 without the problem of knight g4, and you know white can continue with queen d2 and he's ready for a rapid kingside assault. However, this move f3 is double-edged as it hinders white's kingside development, and without a knight on f3 black is going to have several options he wouldn't normally enjoy so easily, such as getting a knight to the e5 square. We're still well within book lines, of course, and play now continued with black castling, and then bishop e3 and c5. Black offers a pawn here on c5. D takes c5, d takes c5, and bishop takes c5. And this is a relatively modern gambit. It had been tried in the past, but Karpov, amongst others, had some great games with the white pieces. Subsequent computer analysis showed that black can indeed get excellent compensation if white now captures twice on c5, mostly as a result of this clumsy kingside development. Svidler did not accept the gambit and he played knight ge2, and this knight is going to head to g3 with or without g4 thrown in first, and as I said, a rapid kingside attack. Grischuk continued with knight c6, which allows d5 with tempo. But black doesn't mind this because knight e5 also comes with tempo, attacking the c4 pawn. So Svidler played knight g3, so the bishop on f1 is defending the pawn, and Grischuk replied h5, which is another double-edged move. This is weakening for the black king side, but it hinders white's kingside advance with h4, h5. This is one of the ideas with knight g3, and it also threatens h4, where white is going to have to undevelop his knight. And indeed that's what happened in the game. After bishop e2, h4, knight f1, just the only viable option. Black is playing aggressively, although he's weakening his position in the process. Grischuk's idea is that the white king is still stranded in the center of the board, and you know, he can play e6 now, which is what he did, and hoping to open the game up quickly. And this has the drawback: the white can answer f4, which Svidler played. And now, where's the knight going? It couldn't go to d7, or d takes e6, d takes e6, and queen takes d6 is problematic. And here came the first novelty of the game, and it was quite a shocker, with knight takes c4 from Grischuk, which must have been preparation on his part, and voluntarily giving up a piece for some early initiative. It's a very sharp try, and there are some strong attacking ideas for black that we'll see a little later. Other options included knight g4. This is attacked twice, but there's a little trick that solves the problems here. Excuse me. Best play is bishop g1. If instead bishop takes g4, knight takes g4, queen takes g4, e takes d5, discovers an attack on the queen by the bishop. And you know, this is another sharp line that black can play. This uncovers the attack on the queen, as I said, and you know, after, for example, queen f3, d4, it's going to win back the piece and gain the bishop pair in the process. So knight d5 is good. It's a very strong square for the knight. It's an outpost for the moment, although the bishop can challenge it later. And after d takes e3, there's a threat of queen a5 check, and this means that white must now castle long, and a sharp game follows with chances for both sides after b5. Very imbalanced and interesting position. So after knight eg4, bishop g1 would be best, and then e takes d5, c takes d5, and now queen e7, and black can almost claim equality here already. But Grischuk clearly had other ideas with his piece sacrifice, knight takes c4. So bishop takes c4. To refute any gambit, it must first be accepted. These were the words of Bobby Fischer in his famous bust to the King's Gambit. So Svidler accepts the piece, and of course this is his best option. If instead d takes e6, bishop takes e6 defends the knight, and black is simply free pawn up. So how to continue after bishop takes c4? The answer is b5, and this is a common idea in many of the Indian openings, this push, which has the idea of undermining the e4 pawn. And the king still being the center means a threat of queen a5 check. If white captures on b5, it's going to win back the piece. And it means that this b5 isn't a pawn sacrifice, although it looks like one. If bishop takes b5, then knight takes e4, and if knight takes e4, queen a5 check, it's going to win the bishop on b5. If knight c3, then bishop takes c3. We'll see that in a second. And if knight takes b5, then knight takes e4. However, after Svidler's bishop takes b5, Grischuk first played e takes d5, because if he plays knight takes e4 immediately, he's going to drop the d6 pawn. After knight takes e4, queen a5 check, knight c3 defends the bishop, so it forces bishop takes c3. Now b takes c3, queen takes b5, d takes e6, bishop takes e6, and queen takes d6. So that's why Grischuk didn't capture immediately on e4 and played e takes d5. And here Svidler answered with e5, further muddying the water. Of course, he knows what Grischuk is playing for. If instead e takes d5, there's no pawn on e4 for black to win with this little trick, so he's a clear piece down, but he can play rook b8 now with the idea of knight takes d5 and rook takes b5 after bishop takes c3. For example, say queen d2 now, knight takes d5, queen takes d5. If instead rook takes d5, knight takes d5, rook takes b5, and you know, there's good play here for black for the piece. So queen takes d5, now bishop takes c3 check, b takes c3, rook takes b5, with ideas like bishop b7, rook e8, and rook b2, although white is better in all lines with accurate play, and it takes nerves of steel for black to give up his dark squared bishop, whilst white still has his dark squared bishop, given that black is being shadowed on the king's side, something I would never play for myself. So anyway, Svidler answered with e5, as I said. So Grischuk plays d takes e5, and it makes sense for black to try and open up the game given the exposed white king. Also playable was d4, and after e takes f6, bishop takes f6. Black is still going to be a piece down. You know, these two pieces are attacked, but say bishop d2, but he has some pawn for the piece and some initiative after d takes c3, b takes c3, and rook b8, whilst white remains undeveloped and at least 3 moves from castling. Okay, that's the end of part 1.